Welcome back to All That Jam, where music has no limits. We are up early with Seth Walker, who has a new single that is out now, a new album, and has had an incredible career. How are we doing, Seth?
Pretty good. How you this morning, Kev?
Very good, very good. So we just talked for a second before we came on, and I was thinking we'd do this like a travel log. You
hmm
got your start in North Carolina. That's where you grew up, right?
Yeah, I grew up in just outside of Greensboro. I don't know if you're familiar with that area, Greensboro, Burlington, a little town called Altamahaw, Ossipee, which is a mouthful. It's a small little one stop sign situation, and I grew up out in the country. Both of my folks are classical music teachers, so I was kind of born into all this out in the country. Yeah.
Right. With now being born into it, has it always been your path that you knew this was what you were going to do?
Uh, not not necessarily. I started playing the cello, but my father plays cello and teaches cello. My mother violin. So I started off on the cello at 5, and my sister she started when she was around 3. That's kind of the I don't know if you're familiar with the Suzuki method of teaching, where it's an ear training thing. And so you start them out young, man. So as I started playing the cello, it wasn't that I mean, I was pretty good at it. I wasn't some phenom cellist. And I kind of liked it. It was something we did, but it definitely wasn't something that I was crazy passionate about. And even at one point around the age of 16, I just stopped. I was into sports. I was playing tennis and listened to, rap music. I was rebelling the whole thing, and it wasn't until college, to pick up on your question, it wasn't until college where I discovered the guitar and blues music, where that's when it really kind of kicked in as far as something that I discovered, and that really ignited something, deeper. Yeah.
Right. Now, do you feel like the playing the cello, how has that influenced? Well, maybe you can't differentiate because you've only played guitar one way,
Yeah.
but do you feel like there's any influence that learning the classical and playing the cello had when you're playing in songwriting when you picked up
Oh,
the guitar?
oh my God, absolutely. Like, there's no doubt. I mean, just my fingers being on strings and just hearing rhythms, and harmony, and just how to hear. Because, like I mentioned, the Suzuki thing is all about hearing. It's not you don't learn it on the written page, and that's what blues and soul music is. It's not written on a page. It's something that you feel. So, albeit two completely different worlds and forms of expression. Classical music is very, you know, it's very regimented.
Yeah, definitely,
It's,
definitely. I always I guess I've always likened it to when you go see a band like Beyonce. You want to hear what's exactly on the album. When you go see classical, you want to hear the classical. If you
yeah,
go see a jazz band, you want to hear them interpret what
yeah,
the song
exactly.
is, kind of thing.
That's a good way of putting it. And yeah,
Yes.
it definitely. I mean, I would not be able to have picked it up so quickly without all of that, training. As I remember, I was in my these guys in my dorm room. They were playing like Eric Clapton, and they had their electric guitars, and we were like, stumbling through "Hey Joe" from Jimi Hendrix and shit. And I remember, well, I bought my first guitar. It was like a little uh, Fender Squire guitar, and I just sat in my room and just played along with those Eric Clapton blues tunes, and subsequently never went to class. And then, yeah. that sent me on the wild goose chase. But all that informed my music tremendously.
Right. So how long between sitting in your room in college there and your first album was there? How much time elapsed between that?
Okay, let's see. Well, I went off to college in 1990 in East Carolina, dropped out, and see me retracing my steps. 92 or 93, moved to Jacksonville, Florida for a hot minute, just trying to just get out from under, just fly the coop, fly the nest. And it wasn't until I moved to Austin where I had my first album. That was in 1997. So we're talking about a 7 year
Gap in
gap
between.
between starting to play guitar and actually putting something out.
Right. And you landed in Austin,
Mhm.
probably the coolest little spot in Texas.
Yeah.
Fantastic music there. Did that influence the first album, or did you have that first album in your mind even before you landed there?
Oh no, I did not have anything in mind, Kevin. Uh, uh, I haven't done anything with very much in mind. As you know, it's like kind of like I'm kind of a by the seat of my pants kind of guy. But when I moved there, I will say that I was really influenced by, as we mentioned, Clapton and Hendrix, but also Stevie Ray Vaughan was, a very big influence on me as in college, just that the feeling he had. And I knew he was from there and from Austin. So I was like, well, this seems like a pilgrimage I should take. And when I got there, now mind you, this was 1995, so it was a lot different Austin than it is now. It was a smaller town, and but it's a very tight knit music community. Not that it's not the same now, but it was a different thing, especially with the blues. It was like this really tight knit blues. We go down to Sixth Street, man, and we go to these blues jams, and I got my ass handed to me. I don't know how many times because I didn't know. I was just learning, right? And it wasn't until I started to understand through this schooling that all of the people that had influenced Stevie and Clapton and Hendrix. And so I started really listening to T-Bone Walker and, of course, early B.B. King and Gatemouth Brown and Charlie Christian and, Nat King Cole and all this stuff. And that, I started like really getting into the jump blues. And that was, if you remember when it was like a swing craze.
Yeah, there was a movie. There was some huge movie.
Yeah, Swingers and all those bands. I somehow found myself getting gigs, just playing copies of T-Bone Walker, and
Right.
next thing I knew, um, just by random luck and some angels, I was gifted a recording session at Willie Nelson's studio called Pedernales Studios, and so I basically just went in there and just started. I had written some original songs, but it was basically just kind of copying jump blues.
Right. You mentioned Gatemouth. I feel
Yeah.
like your second album, I can hear the influence of that and the jump blues and the Texas blues on it.
Mm,
He's so underappreciated. I don't feel like the name Gatemouth comes out of many people's mouths much.
yeah. Yeah, I know. He was Okie Dokie Stomp was one of his early instrumental songs that I would try to emulate and copy.
Yeah.
Opened up for him a few times. Yeah.
Right. I got to see him once at Jazz Fest, maybe 96. He did a
Mhm.
night show. One of those reviews. He came out and played 3 or 4 songs, and they, brought a bunch of like Oliver Morgan, Who Shot the La La, that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
Playing all the hits
He
there.
was great. He was very, and I love the way. I don't think I actually. It's funny that you're really bringing him up more because he doesn't play with a pick, and in the early days, I always played with a pick, T-Bone style, BB King style, and then as I've progressed, I don't play with a pick that much anymore. A lot of that's kind of maybe that was inspired by his playing.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love it. I feel like on the second one too, and then into the third one, your songwriting was becoming more and more refined. Would you say that's a fair statement?
I don't know if refined would be the word, but definitely more curious. Definitely more curious about. There was a drummer that I worked with, Mark Hayes, and he was the first guy to really pull me aside, and he said, "Okay, I want you to start listening to some songwriters. I want you to start listening to Guy Clark and Towns and Nick Lowe and John Hyatt, and and he really was the first guy to go, Seth, you're a great guitar player and all, but you need to pay attention to what you're saying. Pretty good concept if you're going to be a songwriter, paying attention, that is. And so about the third or fourth record, I was really just I was experimenting, honestly. I mean, I just really was. I think I landed on a few things here and there. And a lot of that process, I guess it goes like this for anything in life. You learn more about what you're not than what you are sometimes in that process.
Right.
Yeah.
I read somewhere somebody, I totally spaced and who said it, but the gist of their quote was, "You write 100 songs and you hope one of them works."
Yeah.
It's the process of just doing it over and over
Yeah,
and
it
over.
is. It is. Just feeling what sits right within you, and what because I remember I was really it was about 2000 and let's see, around 2002 I saw Wilco play at Austin City Limits Music Fest, and they just blew me away. I was like, oh my, it was that Yankee Hotel Foxtrot record that everyone fell in love with, and I was like, I want to be Jeff Tweedy, and started writing all this stuff, kind of like this, this totally out of my wheelhouse. And I very soon came to realize that I'm not Jeff Tweedy. And that helped me kind of realign with kind of what the natural language that I speak. And that actually prompted me to release my self-titled record, which is called Seth Walker, obviously, that really kind of, when I made that record, I was like, okay, this is where I like a good I'm rooted here.
Right, this is where I live.
Yeah, this is where I live. Yeah,
Definitely. Well, it's interesting you said I want to be, Tweety. Great. I feel like people who are good at songwriting, great songwriters, go through these phases and they basically absorb everything from there. And
yeah,
then they take it and move on to the next thing, which
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, let me ask you about, you put out an album with a band called The Differentials, and most stuff is just listed as your name. What was up with having a band for that? Was that going to be the direction in the mid 2000s?
Yeah, that was. I had a gig at this little Irish pub in Austin around 2002. We did it every Monday night, and it was kind of like a the idea anyway was this is going to be an experimental gig to kind of get away from the jump blues and thing that I'd kind of become known for, I guess, if you will. And it just turned into this really cool thing. And I had a set band, and we, it became a little unit. And we went to New York. We met this guy who at a gig, and he was like, "Come up to New York, man. I'll record you." It was a really great studio called Dangerous Music Studios. And so that group, we called it the Differentials, which is, I, I don't even know what that even means. It's a little bit of a strange name, but there was drugs involved, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, one of those things you wake up and you're like, we named the band what?
Differential. Okay. I know we're trying to be different, but yeah. Anyway.
Right. So at what point did you move from Austin to New Orleans? Was that around the time the self-title came out?
I I moved to no, I moved to Nashville first.
Oh, you moved to Nashville first.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was around 2009. But I did want to mention one thing, one last thing, Kevin, about that differentials thing. That that really um, that was a great record and a great band to be a part of. I learned a lot through that process. Um, I think it was a lot more informative than I give it credit for sometimes. Now that you're bringing it up.
Right. Any thought of ever getting the band back together?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe actually, I still play with the bass player Lindsay sometimes, and Rob, the drummer. I think he's living out in California. We're all still friends and tight. But that kind of, you know, again, pushed me to the self-titled record, which was 2007, and through that record, I got, I had my first like not only a booking agent came on board, but also like an Americana radio. Started to kind of get it out there a little bit, and that's what he Al Moss introduced me to this guy Gary Nicholson, who's this great writer who wrote a lot of the Delbert McClinton stuff, and he's amazing. And BB, and he's written for Willie and BB King, all these huge names, and he's amazing. And became a good friend. He was the kind of the anchor for me to go up there initially, and that was 2008. Yeah.
Right. And then that ended up being the Leap of Faith album, right?
That was 2009. And I really, just kind of deep ended into that songwriting world up there. I had a little publishing deal for a little while through Gary's son and Gary, and that was very informative. But I will say, and I love that Leap of Faith record. I learned a lot, and met so many people all through that experience. But I will say, I found myself getting a little calculated, like I wasn't quite believing
What you were doing,
what
right?
I was doing, in some cases, and I felt like and that prompted me to go to New Orleans. I was like, well, if anything can,
Shake it loose.
shake it loose and almost unlearn something, it would be a town like that, and that's what sent me down there. And
Nice.
it
I
served,
love
it
it.
served me well.
I tell you what, the first time I flew into New Orleans, when the plane landed, it was the first time in my life I'd ever felt like I was home. And I'd never been there before. I just had this weird
I know.
sense. I went every year for Jazz Fest for 9 years, and then I had a kid. So
Yeah,
that kind of ended that. Made it to Mardi Gras once. Mardi Gras is coming up.
yeah, it sure is. I was there for 6 years,
Oh, nice.
and I had a sweet little spot. Things worked out for me down there, and I the whole experience. It was as much of just the fabric of the culture than it was the actual music that really shaped me. Just the spirit and the syncopation of the city, and how it
It's
somehow
dripping.
flows and works, and like it's just like it's pushing and pulling, and like it. And when you talk to people on the street, it sounds like they're playing the piano when they talk.
Right. Yes, they do. There is something to that. The
Yeah,
city's just dripping with whatever it is, the essence of the universe.
yeah, it's pretty cool. At one point though, it is a tough place, and there's a part of it that feels kind of like to live there full time, like for the long haul. You kind of sounds like you almost have to be like from there. It's like
Right.
it's like in your bones. And I'm a Carolina boy, so but 6 years was good.
Alright. I hear you. At what point did you hook up with Kevin from Royal Potato? I know he had another label.
Yeah, that was early. That was the self-titled record. That was 2006. And he was a public. He was publicist for Hyena Records and partner with Hyena Records.
And then you
And
followed him.
my booking agent at the time, Tina Terry, she sent the record to Kevin, and that 2006. So we've been working together in some capacity for almost 2 decades.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
pretty cool. Yeah, he's my bud. Yeah.
Right. As we got into the 2010s, I think you had a great run there. Time Can Change.
Mhm,
Right. Sky's Still Blue. Wasn't
mhm.
that the
Yeah,
2014 album? And
yeah,
then Sky Still Blue is when you hooked up with Oliver Wood the first time, I believe, right?
yeah, yeah. He produced that album. Yeah, he did.
So how did that happen? I mean, the Wood brothers obviously are one of the most respected names in Americana, and
Yeah, they are. Yeah, we met randomly up in Iowa, Ames, Iowa. This place called the Maintenance Shop, and this was before it was like 2006. So the Wood brothers had just released Ways Not to Lose on Blue Note, and they were just a duo. And I had heard of them. I had a friend, Sean Costello, this amazing guitar player from Atlanta, rest his soul. He had, I remember him, saying, "Man, you got to check out the Wood Brothers." Like, okay. And then just randomly, I opened up for him, and I remember just going, "Wow, this is," and just inspired me so much to hear original and songwriting and original prism through kind of a bluesy language, and jazz language. I was like, oh man, this is it. And then we just kind of, through the years, just kind of remained, loosely connected, and then became closer and closer friends. And then started writing together, Oliver and I, and that kind of we kind of like just fell into doing a record together. That was 2000, and I think we cut it in 2012 or 2013. But yeah,
nice.
amazing. I mean, he's like a compass for me.
Right. Do you always work with a producer, or have you self-produced?
I've self-produced a few. Time Can Change. I self-produced. That record was right after Leap of Faith, and Leap of Faith record was Gary produced it, and it had lots of strings and horns, and it was kind of a bigger thing. And I kind of wanted to do a record opposite of that. And
Much more introspective. Much more
yeah, quieter, acousticy, more record, and so I produced that one. And then, but to get back to your question, um, after that record, I've had either Oliver or Jono help produce it.
right. You did. I always feel like producers help artists, bands, anyone, because it's an outside voice. Sometimes, like when Dylan tries to pick songs for his own albums, he always blows it and leaves like the best song off the album.
Yeah, I know. We all need a little help, don't we? We
He
do,
did.
and just have another set of ears. And Oliver and Jono are both masterful producers in that first they're just a great human. So you play what you are,
Right.
and they both have a great way in very different ways of allowing the record to be what it is. They don't produce with an iron fist, and that's a fine line because it's like you're trying to help the project, but you don't want to like influence it too much,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Unless you're Ted Templeton with Van Halen and you basically take over.
yeah, there's lots of producers that are like that, and some of them have their own sound and way, and that's why you hire them, like a Daniel Lanois or somebody like
Right.
that. You get a sound,
Right. Or Mutt Lange. If you want to do
Yeah,
a
yeah,
hard
yeah,
rock record, you call up Mutt Lange. Yeah,
yeah.
I
There
don't know if
you go.
he's still around. God.
Yeah, that's the Def Leppard guy, right?
Right. Yeah, in AC/DC, he did Back in Black, for those about to rock the huge
Yeah,
arena like things there.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about COVID. You had just put out Are You Open?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was a
Yeah.
little more experimental, groove oriented, some
Yeah.
funk coming in there,
Yeah.
maybe even some psychedelic flourishes. And then we hit COVID. Um, you want to go back in time and tell like where you were at that moment when all of a sudden your gigs were gone?
Yeah. I was in Nashville. I had moved after New Orleans. I moved to New York for a minute, and I was in a relationship, and we ended up leaving New York and coming back to Nashville. And we moved to Nashville like 2019 or 18. So we were both there during COVID, and just living in East Nashville. And I don't know, man. I just we're everywhere we went, there we were in the house. It's just like So I just started. I went back to my little office, and I just started writing some little. Actually, what prompted it was I years ago I used to do little newsletters from the road, and I would write a little something from some tale that happened from the road. And I started reading some of those. I was like, oh man, those are kind of fun, and I just started kind of you know not even seriously, just for fun, just write, just kind of journaling, and just so happened that my next door neighbor, during COVID, we would meet out on the grass and on the lawn and have a drink 6 feet apart, whatever. And I told her what I was up to. She goes, "Well, I'd love to read some of it." And she was like, "Man, this is some pretty good shit here, man." And we ended up. She ended up being my editor. And she's an amazing editor and writer and poet and teacher. And I just kind of somehow backwards landed backwards into writing a book. Yeah.
Fair enough. And it's called In
Your
the
van,
Van.
your van is on fire.
Your van is on fire, and that story is in there. I'm gonna have to get a copy of it. I tried to find the story in cheat, but I couldn't find the page on
Your van is on
anything.
fire. Yeah. Yeah. True
Um,
story. I mean, you can't, it seemed also pretty, metaphorically speaking, pretty apropos for a musician's life. I mean, I guess if you're in the business long enough, something's bound to catch on fire. Uh,
right.
but it's like short stories. It talks. There's some essays about my upbringing with my classical parents and this commune that I lived in when I was young, um, in this log house, and it's got poetry. It's got some artwork in it. So it was a real man. It saved me, Kevin, because it was like I had something that I could sink my teeth into. Because as you said, it wasn't no gigs, baby.
Right. I was
No
I
gigs.
started doing this kind of stuff during it. So
Yeah,
let me
like a lot of silver linings, right?
right. Let me
Yeah.
throw something at you.
Mhm.
Poetry versus songwriting. I have this theory that they work differently because when you have a poem, you look at it on a page, you can see the whole poem. When you're writing a song, you only remember the line you're hearing at that moment. So the line becomes of paramount importance more than like a whole conceit for a poem. Would you buy into that?
Interesting way of putting it. So say that one more time.
Like, well, when you're singing a song, when I'm listening to you sing a song, the only line I'm hearing is the one you're singing. So that
Mm.
line almost has to contain the song itself in it because you might remember the one before, you might know the one coming up, but you can't scan back and look at the whole set of lyrics.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. I get it. So you're listening in real time.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I've never really heard it put that way, but that's kind of interesting way of thinking about it. Yeah, that I through the process of writing the book, um, I mean, obviously, poetry and songwriting are
Oh,
somewhat in the same kind of realm, and
right,
obviously, you have to be, you got to be concise, and you have to.
right.
The less you say, the better. A lot, a lot of the time.
I always thought Hunter was a master of
Oh,
Robert Hunter was a master of just the line. Thank you for a real good time and Loose Lucy. You're like, yes, this is the greatest thing.
it's just like, oh my God, yeah, the Grateful Dead. That my dad, my uncle Landon. I got to back up. When you talking about the Dead, my uncle Landon got hit to the Dead back in like '92 or something. He sent my dad. We didn't know anything about the Dead. He sent my dad 3 Grateful Dead tickets and a bag of something in the mail and said, Scott, my dad, don't ask any questions. Just take your son to this show. And
Yeah.
it blew it just yeah. It sent me on a wild goose chase, bro. You know, and those lyrics, getting back to Robert Hunter, you know, some of that obviously informed all of us. You
Right.
know,
I learned so much about music from going back and looking at a Grateful Dead album and being like, Cannon's Jug Stompers, what is that? You know, and then listening to it and being like, that does not sound like Cold Rain and Snow. What are you talking about? Or Violi Blues. But so much Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard. I mean, all these names appeared because I was digging into the Grateful Dead.
it was a wellspring one. It really was.
It
But
was.
getting back to your poetry comment stuff, I I will say I definitely I remember thinking, oh well, since I'm a songwriter, I should be able I can spit out some poems here, and I learned very quickly that they are different art forms, and I had to really and I did a lot of studying, and my editor helped me. She's like, okay, she started feeding me all this poetry, and they are married, but they're also very very different in a lot of ways.
Right.
And there's also so many different types of both, obviously.
Right. You ended up with the book, with the poetry, but you also ended up with I Hope I Know, which is really stripped down. I mean, I feel like it's a really good album this is what COVID was. I mean, there's
Yeah,
a lot of reflection in that.
yeah. The future and what it used to be is the first song. Which yeah, that was kind of where we all were, and I did that with Jono. Mostly that record was just Jono and I. He on one end of the studio and me on the other end, and half of it was recorded there at the studio, and half of it was recorded in a room about this size in Nashville, just me and a microphone. And
Right.
yeah, I definitely I learned a lot about leaning into the limitations during that record. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Less is
Yeah.
more sometimes, no
Yeah.
matter what Yngwie Malmsteen thinks.
Oh, I need to make a bumper sticker of that.
So it's been a couple years, and now we have Why the Worry coming out. And
Mhm.
I told you before, I think that your latest tune, Mountain,
Up on a mountain. Yeah.
Up on a Mountain, it's a hell of a hot little tune, and
Thank
I
you.
really hope you get some traction with it. I realize there's 9 million charts now, and there's a top 40 for everything. And
Yeah.
yeah, I read somewhere at the end of last year that in one day in 2024, as many albums were released as in the whole year 1989.
Oof.
So I mean, it's got to be so hard to break through, but I feel like that song could. It's
Oh
got a
man.
great beat. I get a real JJ Cale kind of vibe from it, which you also cover at JJ Cale
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
going to be covered on
Yeah.
it also.
Oh yeah.
So what? Let me start with this. Why did you choose to do half? It's half covers, half new tunes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It was. It, it was. I definitely did not have a plan at all. I mean, honestly, when we went into the studio. I went in there to mess around. I didn't even have a producer. Jono wasn't even there. It was just me and my band, me and Reese and Mark, and we were like, let's go in there and mess around a little bit, just shake it loose. I hadn't recorded in a while, So we started doing a few covers and some uh, and a few originals, and we did a cover of "Take Me to the River," Al Green. I kind of like found this other way of doing it, and I remember going back in the control room and going, "Man, like whatever that is, I want to do more of that." And so as far as your question about the covers and versus the originals, I was just doing what I was feeling, what I was influenced by at that time, and I didn't think any more about it, which I think served the record. When I'm looking back on it, I wasn't calculating anything, and JJ Cale, you know,
I mean, there's a guy, Eric Clapton. I hear Eric Clapton do cocaine. I look on the record, it says JJ Cale. I discovered JJ Cale.
I know. And I don't give him enough credit as an influence through the years. It seems like I don't know why, because he's been. I just love his really relaxed delivery. Obviously, his songwriting, of course, is so talk about potency. And so that's kind of how the originals versus the covers kind of came to be. It definitely wasn't anything that I had planned.
Right.
Yeah.
You got some co-writes with Oliver Wood and Ed Jurdi on
Uh-huh.
this one. How does you approach solo songwriting versus writing with someone else?
Well, it seems like when I'm writing them by myself, it either goes one of two ways. Either it comes out just like almost like just like I wasn't even involved with the situation. It just kind of came through, and there it is. I have a couple like that I've written through the years, and then a lot of times when I write them by myself, I just mess with them too long. Like like I'm just a tinkerer with it,
Right.
and so
It's never going to be perfect. At some point you have to be like, I got to let it go out into the world and
you
get
got to take
slaughtered.
the brush off the canvas, man. And when I write with well, for instance, Oliver or Ed or many of these great writers that I've written through the years with, um, not only is it a cool collaboration because we have two, we're both kind of coming at it from a different angle, but we also can kind of get it down. Like, okay, we got a couple hours here. Let's get this baby down. It's like a a splatter of a song, and I kind of like that. A lot of artists, visual artists, paint that way too. Like, bah, and there it is.
Right.
So I guess to answer your question, that's some of the differences that I found anyway.
Right. Do you see an arc to your songwriting?
An arc.
Yeah.
Hmm,
Across everything you've done, or
that's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Maybe not an arc. Maybe maybe it's like a wave
a
of some sort.
waveform? That's
But I, I,
fantastic.
I definitely I can't sit still for too long with uh, with writing and just styles, I guess. I'm definitely influenced by so many different things. Obviously blues and jazz and country music and folk music and lots of world beat music from the New Orleans influence, the Caribbean, the push and the pull. I love all these things, and I definitely write from what I'm feeling at that time, what I'm listening to maybe at that time, what you know. I've always kind of been that way. So I guess the arc, if you will, kind of follows not only where I've lived, but who I'm influenced by.
Right, right. And yeah, I feel like you really have absorbed it because I can hear bits and pieces of things over the course, but I never want to say, oh, that's exactly doing something someone else did. You could say, oh yeah, I can hear the influence. He must have picked this from over here, kind of thing, which I love. I love being able to work through something like that.
Yeah, thanks. I try to not copy it.
Right. Well,
Um,
T.S. Eliot said that good poets imitate and great poets steal.
yeah, I mean,
So,
it's all none of this is ours.
right, you only got 7 notes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So how much can you do? So when you got some live dates coming up, we're gonna put a
Mhm.
link down with all of them so anybody watching can check that.
Yeah.
What is is it a band or is it you solo or what's the deal with that?
Do a little bit of all of it. Start off in Florida in a couple weeks, and the band and I are going to go down there and do 3 shows: Jacksonville Beach, Safety Harbor, which is near Tampa, and then Sarasota. And that will be the band that's on the album. I'm looking forward to that, Reese and Mark. And then I'm going out west doing some solo shows in the Bay Area. And then I'm doing something in the Northwest, which I'm really excited about, is me and Stefano, my piano player, wonderful. I've been playing with him. He's on my first album, the self-titled record. We've been working together forever. We're gonna do a like an intimate, just keys and acoustic guitar and my electric guitar, and we just kind of like a song, just like really stripped down kind of thing. And then I'm doing a tour with Oliver, solo. We'll both be solo on that, and we're gonna collaborate. I'm sure we'll make up some stuff. And
So
yeah.
what goes into your set list choices when you're picking these different things since you have such a huge catalog to pull from?
Yeah, it can be tricky. With the band, we're gonna do. I mean, with the release of the album, we're gonna do a lot of the new shit.
Yeah.
4 or 5, at least 4 or 5 of the new songs off the album. And there's some songs that I always like to do, and that are crowd favorites, I guess, if you will. But every tour, I like to switch it up a little bit and pull from some of these albums. I will say I haven't gone back to any of the differentials. Maybe I should take a peek
Yeah.
back in. There's actually now that I mention it, there is one song off that record called "Lay Down." This is probably the song I've played for the longest. I still
Okay.
play that song. I wrote that in 2002. So that's probably it. Has gotten the most mileage. But to answer your question, I do have to somewhat look at it a little closer, depending on the format that I'm working, because sometimes it's hard to pull some of these songs off with just a solo or duo and vice versa. Yeah.
Right. And I feel like if it's you and piano, guitar and piano, that calls for a different type of song,
Yeah, it does.
than having a band where you want some hopped up music and you want to get everyone dancing.
Yeah, the different gigs and different situations, and honestly, man, that works really well for me because as you can tell, I've got 12 albums of the, what do we call it,
The
the
waveform, yes.
curve, not the arc, and so that serves me pretty well, I think.
There you go. All right. And when does the new album is coming out? When? 2 weeks from now?
April 4th.
Oh, so a month. We got over a month before
Yeah,
that.
we're going to release another tune next Wednesday, and then so we'll have 3 singles coming out, and then the album.
That seems like standard.
Yeah.
I always laugh. You remember Moby Grape?
Hmm.
And they released 7 singles off the album when they put it out, and nobody knew what to buy. Nobody ever heard of Moby Grape again. They put out Wow after, but nobody ever really heard of them again.
Yeah, yeah.
Now bands will release every song as a single and then release the album. you know.
Yeah, I
But
mean, there's all kinds of ways to do it these days, right? With all of the,
yeah.
all of
And
the
there's physical, you're on Royal Potatoes, so there
Mhm.
are physical copies going to be available. You can get the book through Royal Potato too, I
Yep,
think, right?
yep, yeah. All that stuff's on our website. We're doing some like, you know, limited edition, bundle things ahead of the record, so you can check it out. It's all on the
All right.
website. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll have the links below.
cool.
Anything you want to throw out before we wrap it up?
No, man, it's nice chatting with you. Where are you living, Kevin?
I'm in Baltimore, outside of Baltimore.
Okay, Baltimore. Okay,
You know, people always say Philly, but I'm Baltimore. When I
okay.
say
Well,
come
maybe.
on, when I say come on, people are like, "Are you from Philly?" I'm like, "Nah, let's seep down south a
Well,
little bit."
we'll let you know if we come your way, man. You come out
Yeah,
to the show or something. It'd be great. Yeah.
definitely. So, hold on for a sec while I run the outro so I can thank you off
Okay.
camera. Everybody watching, make sure you find us on all our social medias at All That Jam Pod. We have a .com you can go to, and remember, stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long. We'll see you.